Hey, what's up you guys, it's Connor. Today I'm going to be doing a book review for The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. If you guys somehow don't know, The Scarlet Letter is a vastly popular classic that's pretty much read in almost every high school. For some reason I escaped having to read it, and then I had to read it in law school, so now I have a more legal frame of mind going into this novel, so that may change how I analyzed it versus how you will analyze it. It follows this woman named Hester Prynne. She lives in a very Puritan society, a very religious-based society, and at the beginning of the book you find out that she has committed adultery, and instead of killing her because she's with child, they make her wear a scarlet A on her breast for the rest of her life as punishment. Then it follows Hester Prynne as she's living in the society still with this Scarlet Letter, having to deal with the repercussions of everyone being able to see her sins physically on her body all the time, and just living her day-to-day life and just trying to make a living, everything like that. There's a couple of other characters that you kind of focus in around. There's Reverend Dimmesdale, who is kind of the lead of the church in the society. Everyone loves him, and he kind of takes pity on Hester Prynne at the beginning of the book. You know, he's just one of the main players in the book. At the beginning of the book, a new person comes to town named Roger Chillingworth, and he's got his own scheming going on in the background. That's the bare bones of this novel. It explores concepts like pride and shaming and punishment, what makes a good punishment, everything like that. Guilt is another huge concept that's addressed in this book, but as usual with my book reviews, I'm going to go through my pros, go through my cons, give you my rating, and be done. My first pro for this book is just exploring the society. It's definitely a theocracy, and the church rules everything in the society. They don't really have a separation of church and state. This is set early on in the United States, at a time where the church held a lot more power and kind of could make people's lives miserable outside of the church as well as in it. So when going through this novel, we were looking at how this society has set up their legal system, where they decide what's right, what's wrong, the morality of everything, and then how people are going to be punished. At the beginning of the book, if she were not pregnant and she was found out to have committed adultery, she would have been killed, as well as the person that she committed adultery with. They have a type of punishment system where they deserve to be punished. It doesn't matter if the punishment actually would prevent future adulterers from committing adultery, and it doesn't matter if it would prevent Hester Prynne from committing adultery in the future. She deserves to be punished, and that's why she's being punished, and the type of punishment is all given through the church officials and everything like that. At the beginning of the book, she's put up on this pedestal and everyone is kind of staring at her and shaming her and everything like that for her crimes, and then that's when she gets sentenced to wearing the Scarlet Letter. So this whole town is really centered around the concept of shaming people, and her punishment is to have this A as a symbol of shame. It's not really a system where they're trying to rehabilitate as much as it is to shame the person into doing the right thing. At the beginning of the book, they're trying to figure out who is the person that she committed adultery with. Hester Prynne is married at the beginning of the book, and her husband is not in the town, so the fact that she's pregnant basically means she would have had to commit adultery to be pregnant currently. So they're trying to figure out who the guy is that got her pregnant, and she won't give it up because he would be killed because he obviously is not with child. I just thought that the whole system, the theocracy of it all, was pretty interesting to read and analyze, and that's kind of what my class focused in on. I'm in a class called Law and Literature, and we've dived into all these texts to figure out crime, punishment, morality, stuff like that, and how they all interrelate with each other, and then reflect it back onto our current day legal system. So those were the most interesting parts that we were discussing the most. Another thing that I really liked was the exploration of guilt and illness. When people are feeling guilty, they're more likely to show some type of physical illness, which isn't always the case, but it definitely was in this. When someone is feeling guilty, they start to ail and they start to get sick and everything like that. So you follow one character specifically that starts to degrade over the course of the novel. He feels so guilty over things that he's done that he starts to degrade and get really sick and, you know, basically withering away. Although it is very common in classics to represent some type of moral wrong as a physical ailment, which I know is very controversial nowadays, but for some reason classics, they did it all the time. So when someone is doing something morally wrong, back then they would end up with some type of physical ailment. They showed that guilt can have a physical effect on your body, which I think can happen, doesn't happen all the time, but it is there. One other thing that we talked about in class is how adultery is viewed in this novel. Because Hester Prynne is the protagonist of the novel, it kind of gives this weird message of maybe adultery is okay, but it's definitely portrayed as not being a good thing. The author definitely pushes that adultery is still bad and doesn't really excuse Hester Prynne's actions, which was whatever. But regardless of the adultery in this book, this is really a commentary on different types of punishment and what punishments are fair. It also addresses who should be the ones that have the power to give punishment. In this book, it was the theocracy, the church, and the author's opinion definitely is not that that is the right thing. So basically, it's adultery is wrong, but who should be the one that punishes that? It's more just like a discussion starter than it is a hard line on what should happen and what shouldn't happen. Another pro for this book is that I really loved the character Mrs. Hibbins. Mistress Hibbins. She is the like personification of a horrible, evil person in this book. She's viewed as a witch, but it also kind of shows the double standard in society. So if a lower class woman in this society were viewed as a witch, they would be punished immediately and killed. But because she is the sister of one of the like government officials that are in the town, she gets away with a ton more things until after the book's already over, because you find out that she does eventually get in trouble for it. But she is the personification of everything that's bad in this book. She goes to this forest and she meets with the black man or whatever, who is kind of like the devil. She tries to get other people to commit sins and tries to get other people to go with her to the forest and everything like that. She always comments on when one of the characters goes out into the forest. So she is just like this weird evil being that I was loving being in the book, because she always pops up at the like perfect time to throw just a little shade and to kind of point out when the characters are feeling guilty or when the characters are thinking about doing something wrong. So I really enjoyed Mistress Hibbins in this. She was a pretty fun character. My other favorite character in this book is Hester Prynne's daughter, Pearl. Pearl is described as a physical manifestation, like a living Scarlet Letter for Hester Prynne. Every time she looks at Pearl, she has love for her daughter, but she also sees the fact that she has committed adultery. It's interesting how she is this common reminder of how Hester Prynne has done wrong. And the only reason why Hester Prynne is in charge of Pearl and everything like that is because the town sees the effect that Pearl has on Hester Prynne. The people of the town feel validated by shaming other people. So they like seeing that Hester Prynne is constantly shamed by the fact that her daughter exists, which is kind of this weird toxic message, but I thought it was very interesting, their bond, because Hester Prynne really wants Pearl to do well. And it's one of those things that also throws it back in the face of this society, because Pearl is this like very beautiful child. She's always described as being very like ethereal, and people really find her as like a really cute kid. So the fact that she has committed this sin and the kid is beautiful and she always dresses up the kid in these beautiful outfits, Hester's throwing it in their faces how great they've done. For some reason in classics as well, at least the ones that I've read, when a woman is ostracized from society, they always take up sewing and embroidery. So Hester Prynne becomes amazing at embroidery, and so she makes all the dresses for Pearl. And I just really like that Pearl was this like demon child that was uncontrollable, but had a really good sense of other people and could tell when someone was doing something wrong or when someone was sketchy and she didn't want to be with them, and also served as like a double Scarlet Letter, but also a Scarlet Letter for the town because they've treated Hester so terribly, and the fact that Pearl is doing so well. Pearl serves a lot of discussion topics, so if you want to talk about Pearl more in the comments, go ahead and do that. My last pro that I'm going to talk about, I don't know if I've spoiled too many things. I don't think I have. The last pro that I'm going to talk about is that I really liked the women, like chorus style group in this book. At the beginning of the book, these women are judging Hester Prynne and saying how terrible she is, and the youngest of those women tries to see Hester Prynne in a different sort of light, so you can tell that that group of women have had things in their past that they're not proud of, and to make themselves feel better, they jump on the opportunity and start shaming Hester Prynne. So I thought that those women were really interesting, and the kind of course that they take during the novel, because they start off as shaming Hester Prynne and then they get a little bit better as the novel goes along. So really like them as well. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of cons that I had. One was the custom house introductory thing at the beginning of the novel. I don't think that it's necessary to read that to get into the story and understand what's going on, because it's a completely different story. It follows this guy who's the descendant of someone that was from this fictional town and found the Scarlet Letter in the custom house. Fun fact, Nathaniel Hawthorne worked in a custom house, and it seemed like he was just very bitter about it, and so he wrote this introduction to the Scarlet Letter and just basically throws down on everyone that worked with him. And the way that he writes it is very just dense and hard to get through, and I didn't really enjoy it at all. So I don't really suggest actually reading that. I would say look up a summary about what it's about, or read the foreword and then just skip it and jump right into the Scarlet Letter, because it doesn't have anything to do with it, and I didn't enjoy reading it. It was interesting because it added another layer, added another character to the story, but totally not necessary. Another con that I had was that I found that the writing was a little bit denser. This is my first classic that I've read in quite some time, so it could just be that I wasn't used to the style of language. It took me a little while to get into it. The writing I found to be more difficult to get through. I ended up switching back and forth between this and the audiobook version, which really helped me get it done because I had to read it in a couple of days for class. Yeah, the audiobook was actually really good and helped a lot. So if you're having trouble getting through the language and digesting the novel, the audiobook definitely helps with that. Some people in my class were complaining how hard it was to get through. And my last con that I had is that I don't know how much I would have enjoyed this novel without the discussion that we had in class. So I think that if you're reading this book for school, I think that's awesome, because you'll be able to have discussions with other people that have read it, and you can talk about morality and punishment and shame and guilt and pride, because everyone in this book is very prideful, even Hester Prynne. This was a pro for me, but this whole society is very prideful, and it's all about shaming people, which I've said multiple times in this. But Hester Prynne doesn't escape that either. She is very prideful. She takes a lot of pride in Pearl, and she shames the town. So I thought it was really interesting that they were shaming her and she was kind of subtly shaming them back, especially at the end of the novel. The ending definitely shows that she has some kind of like throwing it back in their face. But yeah, without that discussion, I don't know how much I would have really enjoyed this novel, but as it is, I did really enjoy it because of that discussion. Dimmesdale is the worst. I really did not like that character. I was originally going to do a spoiler section, but I don't think I'm going to. But he is the worst. Both him and Chillingsworth are terrible. Don't like them. Big fan of Hester. Live on, Hester Prynne. I guess one last thing that I'll talk about before I give you my rating and be done is that I'm not going to go too in-depth into symbolism or anything like that, just because I'm getting back into classics and I feel like I'm not equipped enough to tackle those topics yet. So if you want to continue that conversation and talk about the different symbols and stuff like that, and spoilers, if you want to go into spoilers, let's do it down in the comments. Just tag your comment as spoilers and then go ahead. I'd actually love to talk about the ending of this book with you guys and talk about the different characters and how they grow throughout the course of the novel and change, and some don't grow at all and just kind of like wither. I did end up enjoying this one and I gave it 4 stars. So that's gonna be my review of The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below if you've read this book and you want to continue discussing it or discussing the spoilers. I would especially like to talk about Dimmesdale and Chillingsworth more down in the comments, because I don't feel like I can talk about it in this video without going into spoilers. So let's do that down in the comments. Also, let me know down in the comments if you would have done what Hester did and keep the identity of her baby daddy a secret, because I don't think that I would have. Anything else you want me to know, leave it down below and I will talk to you guys next time.